Okay, so today we're going to go over sawing and piercing. Okay, these are probably this demo is probably one of the most important demos that we're going to do. In the fact that we'll spend a large portion of the class perfecting the skills that you learned from today's demo. Okay, and you're going to be using this a lot. So again, today I put on our calendar that project 1 drawings are due. We'll see if we get a chance to look at those. We may not. That's okay. I just wanted you to have them done by today, and then we'll start looking at those next class if we have to, depending on how long this goes. Okay. Today we'll do sawing, piercing, drilling, layout transfer, and finishing. You will have a quiz on this on Monday next week. Okay. Everything you need to know is on this board. So I would, take a picture of this, print it out, copy it, whatever you need to do to be able to get this information, because most of your quiz questions are on this board right now. Okay. So this, like I said, the main thing that I want to stress with this is that we're going to start sawing your ring. So we're going to take your silver blank, and I've actually made some drawings. I did mine digitally. I'm going to put a video of how to do this if you're interested, to also show how this was done. You don't have to do this, but this would be smart in the sense that if you make this and you do it kind of digitally from your drawing, your initial drawing, you're going to wind up with a much more accurate thing in the end. Okay, and I think that's the most important thing I want to talk about in terms of ring designs and accuracy, is that the more accurate your drawing, the more accurate your piece will be. If you start off with a sloppy drawing, you're going to wind up with a sloppy ring. Okay, I just don't know any other way to say it other than accuracy in terms of getting down your pattern. I'm sure the same thing is true anytime you've done any sort of fab work. That pattern, the layout lines that you created, it is so important. Okay, and so make sure that you write that in your notes and stress that you need to have an accurate pattern. Now, is that to say that you can't draw it by hand, that initial pattern? No, you can absolutely draw it by hand, but it shouldn't be sketchy. Okay, I've seen students even just draw on the metal, and you can do this. You can draw on the metal and you can cut something out, but it's not going to be accurate. Okay, because we are always sawing, and this is the other thing I want you to write in your notes. You're sawing outside the line, and then you're filing to the line. Okay, so you're sawing outside the line. You're not sawing on the line. I don't know how many times you may have cut something in the wood shop and you saw right on the line. Okay, if you saw right on the line, you have no reference for what the thing is. You've destroyed it. So you always saw outside the line, just slightly, not too much, right? And then you file down to the line, and then you know you're going to achieve accuracy. Okay, so make the pattern tight. Okay, really good. All right, there's basically 3 major ways of getting a pattern onto your metal. Okay, and I want you to know these are quiz questions. Okay, one is direct transfer. I'm going to summarize this briefly because I gave you the handouts to read, and I'm not going to spend time going over all of this, but basically direct transfer is where you're painting the metal with a water-based white paint. You paint that on, you let it dry, and then if you've got a drawing that you've made in pencil, we probably all did this in school, you take the pattern and pencil it, lay it on top, and you rub the back with a spoon or something like that, and it's going to transfer that pattern in graphite. Bad part about it is the graphite rubs off easily, especially while you're sawing. Your hands start to sweat. It's not a very, it's good for quick things, right? You want to try to transfer pattern quickly. Okay. Scribe transfer, that refers to using a material, couple options. One that I use is Daikin Blue. Do you ever use this? Yeah, a lot. Me too. All the time. Do you use the spray version, or do you use the liquid, the brush?
Just depends how big the piece is.
Yeah, so I've got this in spray form at my shop. I use this all the time. It's a blue fluid. It will stain your fingers, okay? Really bad. Okay, it'll be on there for a long time. So basically you brush this on the metal, coat it, okay, and I've already got a piece here that's done. and you let this dry. It takes a little bit for it to dry, and you get this blue surface on the metal, okay? And then you can take a scribe, which we usually keep our scribes over here in a little block. And we take this scribe, has a little protective sheet over it, okay? And then we can use our ruler to lay out lines for where we want to cut, right? And the through the scribe line, the pops and really shows up well. They actually make, a Dykem blue that is red, that is for copper and non-ferrous metals. I have it, we don't have any here, but it actually shows the line a little bit better, I think, the red does. But typically I use the blue on aluminum and other metals, you know, that are white. Usually it shows pretty well. So then you wind up with these lines, and then you have something to saw to, okay? So this works really, really well. There used to be a mean trick that they would do at a place I worked. We had safety glasses that had black nose pieces, and you'd put your glasses down, right, on the table when you go to break, and they come in and they put a little Dykem blue. So they had some Dykem blue gel, and then you'd put that gel on, or they put the gel on there, and you come back from break and you put your glasses on, and then you'd have blue marks on your nose for like the next 2 weeks, you know, so kind of a mean trick. So anyway, Dykem blue, great layout fluid for being able to transfer your pattern, okay? By the way, you can actually laser cut through that Dykem blue too, so you could use a laser cutter just like we were talking about with etching to be able to like burn through that and do layout lines on a laser cutter for future cuts as well. The main method that I want you to learn is adhesion transfer. And adhesion transfer simply is taking, here are my scissors, it's simply taking a printout. So in this case, this is what I learned when I was a student, that basically you take your drawing out of your sketchbook and you photocopy it, because you don't want to use your original. You want to have that in case somebody says, hey, I want a ring like that. You'll have your original copy, right? So you just photocopy from your sketchbook. So after we've talked about your design, I would recommend that you photocopy, or again, if you want to do it digitally, I will post a video on how to do that digitally. But basically you cut out this pattern. Okay. Now the method that I learned in school was you took rubber cement, good old rubber cement, right? And you coated this piece of paper, and you coated your metal, and then you stuck it together, and you kind of squished it, and then you peeled the pattern back up. Why do you do that? You know? If you use rubber cement properly, you actually don't want to stick the pieces right away. So you stick them, you pull them apart, and it creates this like tacky, it's really sticky. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. You can actually start to touch it and it gets real tacky. Then, once it's tacky, then you put it together. Okay, so write a note to yourself. If you're going to use rubber cement, use it properly. Don't just get in a hurry and paste it on and not, you know, peel it and let it get tacky, okay? So that's how I learned. Now, I like Super 77. Now, this stuff is nasty, okay? If you use this stuff, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a well-ventilated area, and you want to wear a respirator, okay? So when we use this, a lot of times we'll go over to the spray booth in sculpture, and we'll use this in the spray booth, okay? If you read the can, right, it says on here that it causes cancer in California, okay? So if you live in California, right, strong chance of getting cancer, okay? That worries me, right? In North Carolina as well, okay? So anyway, so be very cautious with this. So I am going to use it real quick just because we're here and I've got the demo, so I'm going to do it over here so you guys don't. And I'm just going to do it in the trash can because it always has a lot of overspray. Okay, so we've gotten that coated. And we've got our 16 gauge sterling silver. Now, if you don't have your silver, you don't have to have it with you today. But if you didn't get it, let me know. Sam, I think we need to get yours to you. I don't think I gave you silver, did I?
No, you didn't.
But I gave it. You guys silver, right? Okay, good. So you'll notice what I did. I just made sure that you know, my pattern, I could see when I place this that my pattern, where it was in relation to the edge of my metal, I could have trimmed that clean and flush if I wanted to, okay? Now I'm just gonna kind of burnish that onto the surface, and this is gonna be stuck super well, okay? All right, now, again, those are your three methods. A version of this would be vinyl too. You could cut vinyl. I'm doing this more and more for sawing. I'm actually cutting vinyl and I'm transferring that onto my metal as a pattern to saw to as well. It works really well, especially if you've already got a digital file. Now we could do that, but some of these details are really, really small in here, so this makes more sense. But keep in mind that an adhesion transfer method would be using vinyl as well, okay? All right, now, saw frame. This is your jeweler's saw frame. You have different saw frames that may be a little bit wider. Let me show you what I mean by that. I have deeper saw frames, right? So this is for sawing into a larger sheet of metal, right? Because we've got more depth there. This is kind of hard to steer, okay? It's kind of like an 18-wheeler, okay? It's like definitely something that it takes a little getting used to. We have shallower frames. They even make even shallower than this for smaller things that are like a sports car, you know, like it really like cuts very, very easily, and the fact that it's easy to steer, okay, around corners and stuff. So we're going to use this saw frame. You'll notice the back of the saw frame is adjustable, and that is to allow you to set this so that you can create a certain amount of tension on your blade, okay? Now, blades. Blades that you've received in your pack, you've got 2s and 2/0. You'll notice, and this is a quiz question, number 2 saw blade should be used with 16 gauge, right? That's thicker. Then 18 gauge, and 18 gauge, you'd use a 2/0, okay? 2/0 blade. So I'm going to use a number 2 blade. I'm sawing this piece of sterling silver that's 16 gauge. I'm going to use a number 2 blade. Now another quiz question is, how do you know how to select the right size saw blade? Well, if you were to unbundle, let me just show you how to unbundle these real quick. So you take and I kind of break the wire off the end where it's kind of like bunched up. I just pull on it, and then it gives me an end, a strand that I can unwind. Now I don't unwind this all the way. You unwind it all the way, you're going to drop the dozen saw blades that you have on the floor. You just loosen it so you can pull one out, and then you wind that back up, okay? All right, so we have that wound up. That can go to the side. All right. All right, so if I were to take that saw blade and hold it up to the thickness of metal, I would want 3 teeth at least touching the thickness of that metal. If I measure that, if I actually look at those teeth and where they're touching, okay? Does that make sense? So 3 teeth should touch the thickness of the metal to assure that you have the proper saw blade selected for the gauge metal you're cutting, okay? Now, think about this just for a second. If we had a saw blade, let me just throw this on the board. If we had a saw blade, here's your thickness of metal, and it was like that, and there was one tooth touching. What's that going to be like? What's the experience going to be like? Yeah, it's going to be really rough, and you're going to hear it. It's going to like rip. It's going to want to get caught too. It's going to like get jammed. So if you ever find your saw blade getting jammed a lot, it's probably because you're not using the right size. Now, the inverse of this. What happens if we have 4, 5, 6 teeth touching the thickness of that gauge? What's the experience going to be like?
Will it take forever to cut?
It'll take forever to cut, exactly. It'll be smooth. It'll be silky smooth. Sawing. but it'll take a lot longer. So that's what I mean by the 3 teeth is optimum for both speed and smoothness. Okay, all right? Okay, saw blade. The teeth on the saw blade face down towards the handle when we load it. That's a quiz question too. What I ask, what part of the saw frame do the teeth face? And you say the handle, okay? So they're gonna face down, they're gonna have an angle downward, okay? Now, they're hard to see, and so the way I usually do this is I do it by feel. So if I can feel that my teeth are grabbing my finger, then I know that when I rub it, if I rub it this way towards the handle, I know I'm in there right. So if you can't see the teeth, and as you get older, that'll be a problem. Right now you're young, so you can probably see them fine. And you'll notice that I just stick this in between. I loosen this block right here, and I stick it in between, and I just tighten that down. Now, right now, you'll notice this does not come into contact with that top block. So I probably need to lower this just a little bit. Now, you'll notice I'm only going to lower it till it just touches on this particular saw frame. On a deeper saw frame, you might actually have a gap because there's so much flex in this saw frame. Now, we need to tension this, okay? So what I do is I stand up and I lean into it. Now notice we were just barely touching the block, right? Now we're gonna lean in. I open up the block, and again, this gives me both hands free if I use my hip. And then I gently release my hip pressure, okay? And I wind up with a saw frame that is tensioned. Now, I need to have glasses on at this point, but in your notes, you need to have safety glasses on. This is loaded, okay? It's loaded in that, listen to this. Hear that? If you don't hear that fine pitched, ting, you don't have enough tension on it. If it's like boom, not enough tension, it won't cut. And you'll break blade after blade after blade if there's not enough tension on it, okay? You can see it even puts this in a bit of a kind of a angle, you know, because of the tension that's on it. So you want that. Now, if we were to flick this with our fingers, this blade breaks really easy. I can snap these blades with my fingers when they're just, you know, in the bundle. So if we flick this, there's the potential that a little piece will fly out. It'll fly in your eye, okay? So wear your safety glasses. Make sure that you write that down, okay? Wear your safety glasses. Now, if you're not certain about the saw frame and whether or not you've got the saw blade in there properly, I want to show you a little trick. You can actually, every metalsmith learns this. You think of this like a cat. This is the cat's tail. Here's the cat's body, okay? And so when you rub a cat, how do you pet the cat? Where do you start? At the head, and then you rub backwards. So if I can do this, go in this direction towards the handle, I know that, and it's fairly smooth, I know that I've got my blade in right. If I go this like, it's gonna catch my finger and like cut it, okay? So that's how you can tell if you have to get it loaded if you're in there properly. And obviously the teeth face out, right? Not back, okay? All right, now, later on, we'll talk a little bit about this, but soap, wax, or saliva, a little bit of spit, can actually lubricate your blade. So sometimes, and not all metalsmiths do this. Some people are like, no, you don't need it, but I usually take a cheap bar of soap and have it near my bench, and I can just put a little bit of, just kind of saw into it, and it lubricates the blade slightly. All right, let's talk about sawing. So one of the things that's going to become a problem is that when you first start, you're going to have bad form. Your form is very, very important. Your body stance, your position, all of these things play a factor or a role in how well you can saw, okay? You may have noticed when you come in, the benches and the seats make you feel like you're a kindergarten kid, right? That's intentional. These are meant to be moved down, so you can actually take these and like run them down lower, because you actually want this bench pin. And I'll be honest, my bench in my studio, I have my bench pin actually about that much higher. And it allows me to be at eye level with my workpiece. So you have a bench pin in your kit that you can clamp onto your table, but I would recommend trying to get low. Don't be at a stool and be up here trying to saw, okay, with your piece down here. And I've even seen some people make a block of wood to then mount that too to get it even higher if you're working at home. So at home, you need to set up a place with your bench pin so that you can work from home on some of the things that we're going to be doing. Namely this one right now, or this project that we're starting now. So the bench pin has a V that's sacrificially, it's a sacrificial block that's cut. And so this, you're going to cut into this. Like this, your saw blade at some point is going to contact that. That's fine. That's okay. We don't want to cut the end of it off, obviously, but like it's okay to cut into it. Now, the farther you're up in the V of the bench pin, the more support you have for your metal. And this is important because if your metal starts to flop around, you have no control of it and you're going to break a blade and then another blade and another blade. So you want to have it way up in that bench pin V to be able to saw, okay? To support it. If you're hanging out way out here, every saw cut that you make, because the saw cuts on the downstroke, that's a quiz question by the way, it cuts on the downward stroke, and so if that is pulling it down and flexing it, you're going to snap blade after blade, okay? All right. I'm just going to jump in here and show you how you kind of start a cut on a piece of material, okay? All right, so I usually take a slight upward cut to get the cut started. So I kind of go like that. And then the next one, I start cutting, okay? Now, a couple things to note. I have my fingers like this behind the blade, okay? And it acts as a way to hold this down and steer it. Many times I've seen students clamp this with a C-clamp. That's silly, okay? You've lost all your ability to steer now, okay? So you need to get in the habit, and I've heard students every semester say, oh, this hurts, my hands are cramping up. And I'm like, yeah, they're gonna cramp up a little bit, but you also don't have to death grip it, okay? Like I'm just placing these on here, my fingers on here loosely, so I can keep that under control, but yet not like, pinch it, okay? All right? I've taught my kids, all my kids, I taught them to saw with a jeweler's saw at a very young age. I've got video of my son, I think when he was probably 4, and he can saw without breaking blades. So you all are capable of this. You're totally capable. So again, you'll notice my feet are like this. I'm not doing this, right? You'll also notice that I keep my saw frame perpendicular to the piece of metal I'm sawing, okay? What I mean by that is if I start sawing like this, I'm gonna break blades. If I start sawing like this, I'm gonna break blades. You have to keep that blade perpendicular. Okay. Now, the other thing you'll notice is I'm using the full length of the saw blade. I'm not doing this. You'd only be using 4 teeth right there, you know? So you're cutting full stroke. Okay? Okay, now you might want to come and watch over my shoulder just briefly, like if you kind of jump in like over the right side of my shoulder and over here, maybe walk up a little closer, just briefly. Okay, I'm going to show you how to steer. Ready? Now I'm going to start going faster. You'll be able to go faster once you get more experience. See how I can steer that? So you'll notice that I can't stop and steer it. You don't stop and then crank it. If you do that, you'll break the blade. So you got to keep it moving while you're steering. So anytime I get ready to move my fingers, you'll notice I stop sawing so I can reposition my fingers to get a better grip on it. And some people ask, well, how tight can you go? And you can see from that little thing I've already cut. Now, see what happened there? It bends. Now you have to be careful. If it bends the metal down from pulling it down, you need to very carefully push that back up. Now if you keep doing that over and over, eventually it's going to snap off. So you'll notice this time I'll go way up in the V, and I'm even going to be cutting into the wood. You can kind of hear it. You can see a little wood dust coming off there. So you have to support the metal, especially when you're cutting small details, up in the V of the bench pin, okay? But look at how fine you can go with that. Now, you do need to be careful. These can cut you, these blades can cut your skin into your skin pretty easily. So, you know, don't get too close to it. And especially like if you break a blade, sometimes it'll snap, and it'll, like, I've had students get them stuck where the little broken part goes in their skin, and then they have to rip that out, and it wants to get caught because of the angle of the teeth and all that. So anyway, so that's an example of how we can cut really fine things. And if I want to back out of that cut, look at what I do. I just like keep moving it up and down and just rotate back, or I could untension the saw frame, right? Now this is a little tight here because it got bent. So I'm just going to untension the saw frame. I'm going to lean into it. This time I'm using my chest or my hand, and it doesn't matter which end you undo. And then I just pull that off of there. And then I can go back, I can retension, listen for my ping. Okay, we're plenty of tension. Now let's show you how to do a right angle. Okay, so if we want to do a right angle, geometric, right? I'm going to saw in a certain distance. Now watch this. I'm not going to let, oh, let me back up for a second. So when I'm sawing like this, I'm not pushing the saw, okay? That's where I see students break blades too. They start to push it. I'm just letting the saw frame do the work. And you notice I kind of grab my saw frame just with like my thumb and my index finger. The others can, so I'm not like death gripping that either, okay? So I'm just letting it saw. Now, if I want to do a right angle, I actually hold it. I don't let it go forward. And watch this. As long as I keep the saw frame moving, but not forward, once I get to my right angle, then I'm like, okay, now I'm good to go. And I'll let it go and start biting in. Okay, now let's do that again, okay? Let's take a right angle this way. So I'm just gonna keep it from going forward. And what it's doing is it's cutting a, you can barely see it, but it's cutting a little path to make that right angle turn. Okay, like that. See that? Now we're ready, and we can start cutting again. Okay, simple. All right. So let's just go ahead and we'll just cut this. I'll make another right angle here. That was a little more rounded, but so I would recommend this weekend you should grab a piece of scrap that you have in your bin. You should set up a place to saw at home, and you should just practice, even maybe without a drawing first, like I'm doing. So I have no drawing that I'm going off of. And then, after you've done that, I'd say, okay, now put down a drawing, glue down a drawing, and practice your accuracy of sawing outside your line. So that's one of your assignments for this weekend, okay? Is to just practice on something. And again, it doesn't need to be huge. And if you look out on the table here, there's several examples of different things that we've done in the past, you know, like where I'll say, oh, you know, I'd like to do a silhouette. Like we used to make these silhouettes of people, students would do like an activity. So like this is a stand that I made. You actually bend this and this becomes the shadow of the anvil. and then it holds it up. And so, you know, you could do some. Now this is not an assignment. This is just, I just want you to get some practice before you go in to use your piece of silver, because this is expensive. This is not, okay? And so I don't want you to wreck your piece of silver when you've had no experience sawing whatsoever. Now, after a while, that starts to get a little choppy. The blades will, you know, they'll get dull from the more you saw. Now, when you first start sawing, you'll break the blade before it ever dulls, okay? Because you're a newbie, okay? But the goal is to see how few blades you can break in the beginning, okay? So there we go. We wind up with this little thing, right? And then we got that cut out, okay? Really simple, okay? So I'm gonna get into the ring now. Now the ring, when you get ready to saw it, you may decide that you want to saw the interior stuff first, okay? Because then you've got more to hang on to. You have to look at your design and decide. So you guys can go ahead and sit down if you want to. So we have to decide if we want to saw out the inside first or saw out the outside. I'm gonna leave the excess. I could stump shear this excess off, but it'll give me something to hang on to. So I'm gonna keep that there, okay? Now, I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and just saw out the interior first. So I'm gonna unload my saw frame so there's no tension on it. So don't leave that loaded. First of all, it stresses this over time. And then the other thing is you reach into your box and you flick it and you've broken your blade and it flies out and hits you or whatever, okay? So just kind of set that off to the side. All right, now, when it comes time to saw out the inside, what do you think we need to do? Yeah, we gotta put a hole in it. We gotta put a hole of some sort on the inside. Now, I'm gonna use a surface plate. Now, this is a surface plate or surface block. Now, you've used these for stamping. Yours are over here, so you can use those little ones. The back of your bench pin, if you don't mind, Trinity, get your bench pin out of your kit one. The bench pin, you'll notice, has a steel block, right, as a part of it. So that is an area, yeah, where you could use your surface plate block as a device to be able to create an area for drilling a hole. Now, anytime we drill a hole, when we get ready to drill into this, the drill bit's gonna wanna walk and skate across the surface if we don't have a divot to be able to start the drill bit in. So we always use a center punch, and I want you to make sure you know that term. Now, center punch normally is up on the wall over there in front of the drill presses. We have two different styles. We've got this, which you can take and put over the area, and then you lightly tap it, okay? I've had students in the past, because it's called a center punch, they think they are supposed to use this to punch through the metal. You're not, okay? You do that, you're gonna deform your metal horribly. We just put a very light tap. And I'm even gonna show you, I could use a center punch or even a scribe, and the metal is soft enough, I could even just do this. And that's a good enough center punch mark for that to work, okay? So you don't have to like, bam, okay? It's just a light kind of prick or a divot that you create. Now we also have what's called an automatic center punch. So instead of having to like hold this with your middle finger and then hold this in position and hit this with a hammer to keep this from bouncing around, right? You could just use the automatic center punch. And with this, it's just spring loaded. So you come in and you go like that. And man, when I first learned about these when I was a kid, I thought, man, this is the coolest thing ever, because I can just like push down and it automatically creates that divot. That we can get from the outside. So I could come in on the inside of each one of these holes and just punch around, okay? So this also hangs up on the wall over there, okay? Super useful tool. Now, because we use the surface plate, when we punch this, we didn't deform the metal, it stayed flat. If you did this over wood and you punched it or you did this, it's gonna give, the wood gives underneath and it causes that metal to flex up, and then later on when we go to sand, it's gonna be a pain to get this like perfectly flat, sand flat, okay? So that's why you always use the surface plate or surface block use center punch. So make sure you know that on your notes that you always use that, okay? All right, okay, let's show you the drill press. And we'll do that over here. Come on over. Bring your stools with you. Bring our camera with us. All right, so over here is the drill press, and with this we're going to use, we've got two different small drill presses that you can use. We're going to use this little what's it called, the Do-More press. This is a brand of drill press, and you'll notice I brought my drill bit gauge over here. Now I could actually stick my saw blade in a specific hole in the numbered drill bit gauge, and I could kind of figure out like what size hole to drill. Honestly, it's not a huge deal. We don't want to drill a monster massive hole. We just want a small hole to get that through. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball that, but later on we'll talk more about that drill bit gauge, so make sure you know that term. Now in sculpture, you typically use a set of bits that looks like this, right? This is a set of fractional bits. They make fractional bits, they make lettered bits, and then they make numbered bits. So the fractional set is too large for anything, most things that we do in here. We keep it because like sometimes we do larger things. But the main bits that you'll be using are these numbered sets. And these are numbered 1 through 60. So it goes all the way down to a 60. We even have a set that's smaller than this. I don't know if I have a set out here that's smaller. I've got a set that's 61 to 80, and those bits are like, you could break them with your fingers easily. So I'm just gonna take and drill a regular size, and I've actually got one in here. I'll just leave, I'll pop out and show to you. But the numbered bits have very small gaps or increments between them, right? They're really closely sized to each other. So we're just gonna drill with that. If the tip, yeah, that looks pretty good. But I want to talk a little bit about the drill press. So the drill press, this particular drill press is different than a drill press you've used in sculpture. This drill press, you can adjust the head on, so you can loosen this. And now if you let go of it, it'll slide all the way down and crash. So you want to kind of hang on to the head, and we can tighten that so we can change the distance of the head on it. And then we can raise the platen, just like we would on a regular drill press. We can loosen the back knob, and we can raise this up. But you'll notice that there is no quill. There's no quill feed, right? This is the quill right here on this one. There's no quill feed. Instead, there's platen feed. So the platen that you rest the material on, it goes up into the drill bit instead of the drill bit coming down to meet it, okay? So that's kind of unique. And then the other thing that makes this drill press unique, there's a switch on the side of it, right here. All right, you're like, well, wait a second, it doesn't work, okay? It does. There's a foot pedal, and the foot pedal is just like your accelerator. The harder you push down, the faster it goes. Okay? You don't need to run a full tilt like that, but this drills at a fairly high rate of speed because a lot of the smaller drill bits we want a higher speed to drill through. Now the drill chuck on this one, you've got a little key. We usually set the key up in here, so it rests up in the hollow of the column. And then we open up, we stick our drill chuck key into the drill chuck and engage the teeth, and then we can slide our bit in. Now you'll notice I usually kind of wiggle this bit around a little bit while I'm tightening, because there's the danger that with this little tiny chuck, you can sometimes get your drill bit caught between two of the jaws instead of all three, and it'll be like off center. Okay, now you can see when I spin that, we can tell that it's centered. Okay, and I always get in the habit of tightening all three holes. Now this seems redundant. Most people that use a drill press are like, you only need to do one because it automatically tightens, but you will find that you'll get less slip in your drill bit because the jaw is designed so that each one of these gives you a little bit more tension if you do eat all three of those. Okay. All right, so now we can see that we're spinning true,
And then I'm going to take a block of wood. Please, please, please do not drill into my table like several fools have, okay? We want to put down a block of wood or scrap piece, sacrificial. And then the other thing you have to notice is that I've had students do this before where they're trying to drill and they can't get through the metal. And I'll show you what happens. Basically, they get this set in a kind of in-between space, and they're bottoming this out before they actually can get through. Does that make sense? So you want to make sure you have this elevated up high enough that you've got enough depth that you're going to go down into your wood but not hit your platen. Okay? All right. Now, when we drill this, we are not going wham up into that. Okay? You're not punching through it. You're letting the drill bit do the work. Okay? So I always talk about this in terms of speeds and feeds, and you'll hear this if you get into more machining and more different types of metal production. You'll hear about speeds and feeds. I want a very high speed on my spindle, this, but I want a very slow feed. Okay, you don't want the reverse, a very fast feed, wham, okay, through it. That'll break your blade. It'll snap and get stuck in your piece, and there's no way for us to get that out. Okay, well there is, but it's very difficult. Okay, so high speed, slow feed. So I'm going to be very gentle when I'm, getting ready to drill through the piece. I also have oil nearby. This is important. It lubricates the drill bit. So, and it doesn't take much. You'll see, I'm just going to take a little bit on my finger, and I just rub that on the drill bit. Okay. And that's going to help lubricate that. And then I'm going to line up my hole, my divot. Okay, so there's my divot. And line that up. And then I'm going to start the machine without it touching the work. Okay? And you'll notice I'm pinching tight. This is the case where I do kind of have a death grip on it. Okay? We don't clamp like we do over in sculpture because so many of our pieces are so small. Normally you use a clamp and clamp this down. Instead I put my thumb underneath the platen and I put my 2 fingers on top, and it allows me to hold this very tight. Okay? Okay, so here we go. You ready? And there we're through. Okay? Now, the metal heats up. All of the metals that we use transfer heat very, very well. Okay? So you get, I started to feel heat coming up through my fingers. Okay? If it gets too intense, there's nobody that's telling you have to sit there and drill that entire hole right then and there. You could drill a little bit and be like, ooh, it's getting warm. Okay? And just stop. Just stop for a little bit. Okay? Switch to a different location, or get a different piece of metal that you're trying to drill, or whatever. Okay? Take a break. What I normally see students do is they drill, and the heat starts building, and they're like, I can handle it. And the heat starts, keeps building. I can handle it. And they're like, I can't handle it. And they still have the machine on when they are like letting go of it. And so you know what it becomes? A helicopter blade. Okay? It's stuck into the drill bit, and it starts whipping, and your hand is right there, and it cuts your hand. Okay? So slow down. Nothing has to be done right then and there. Okay? Now that was a little tough, and I think the drill bit bit is a little dull. So I'm going to probably switch this out before we drill another one. But you'll notice that you get this material. This material right here, Trinity, you know what that's called? You could call it a chip. Yeah, you could call it a chip. The technical term is swarf. That is swarf, S-W-A-R-F. So there's the word for the day, right? So swarf. Swarf will clog the flutes of the bit. And so when I see students break bits, what happens is the swarf gets clogged in these flutes, and then when they drill another hole, the new swarf doesn't have a place to go, and it snaps the bit. Okay? So in the future, make sure you always clean the bit between holes. Okay. Let's pull a different size out of here. Let's see if we've got one that maybe a little bit larger. And you'll notice we don't have to change our center punch size or anything like that. The same center punch will work for this, okay? So we're gonna open up our jaws. This chuck tends to be a little tight. Sometimes you can actually do this by hand, just by sliding this top collar, but this one you can't. I need to do a little work to it, but. And then I'll do all three. Now, if we needed to drill a larger hole like this, I would not start with this. I would drill what's called a pilot hole. And the pilot hole is a smaller hole that then this will have less likelihood of skating in, okay? So if you're ever gonna drill big holes or bigger, you know, like even up into the second row right here, I try to drill a pilot hole first. Okay, we'll set this up. Now let's drill another one. Again, I'm going to use a little oil, but on each time I do this. That's much better. That went really fast. I can see the swarf coming off. If you don't see swarf coming off as you're drilling, you know that the drill bit's dull, okay? And it can actually work hard in the metal and make it more difficult to drill and eventually breaks off, okay? So that's what we want, okay? So we got, and we would do this for all of our holes. We would basically come in and like drill all, and so this is something you can do here. One other thing I forgot is that we have these big face shields. Oops, they're over here, sorry. I recommend you wear one of these with your safety glasses. And the only reason I say that is when you're new and you're starting to use this, if that thing does let go and it gets, you know, and it flings it out, it's gonna hit that shield and not your beautiful face, okay? All right, so wear this. I'll keep one of these hanging up right here. Wear this when you drill with this little drill, especially because it's right at face level, and I just want you to be very cautious, okay? And careful. One last thing about drill bits. When you go to drill your pilot hole, you ever drill a pilot hole? Yeah, okay. How do you select your drill bits, pilot hole size?
It probably depends how thick the material is and what size I'm going.
Yeah. So when I was starting off in fabrication, a lot of times I'd just be like, okay, if I'm gonna go up to like a 1-inch drill bit, I'm just gonna like go up every 4 or 5 bits and start small and work my way up. Start with maybe a 1/4 inch or something like that. Little trick you might not know is that the way to select your pilot hole size is the drill bit has this thing called the web. This is the web, and I chose this because it's a big bit. So that position right there, that distance between here and here is the web, okay? So if I'm drilling a 1/2 inch hole, my pilot hole should be the size of the web, okay? So a little trick for you in the future if you ever need to know what size pilot hole. That's harder to measure obviously on a small, and I typically work, you know, every 5 to 6 bits or 4 to 6 up if I'm drilling a pilot hole with numbered bits, okay? Now, the swarf. This is silver. It's valuable. Save this. Put it in a little film canister or some sort of little container, because if you ever take another metals class, we've got a casting class, we can melt this down and you could make a silver ring out of your scraps that you cut out. So even when you cut scraps out of your ring, save them, okay? We call that sweeps. When I file the silver, I save the sweeps. That's what these little catch trays are. You pull this out while you're sawing and it catches all your dust. And then at the end of the day, you pull that whole tray out, you knock it to one side, and then you pour all your sweeps into a container. And we can remelt that. It's super valuable, okay? All right, when you're done, make sure you remove the drill bit. Now, this is very important. When you're done removing this, I don't remember what size this was. I didn't check what number. So guess what I do? I take my drill bit gauge off the wall and I say, oh, no, too tight, way too loose. Here's perfect. And it says it's a 49. So now I know if I open this up, this goes in the number 49 spot. Okay? So that's all there is to that. And then, like I said, we used to keep a broom here, but I usually borrow this broom here. And we just sweep. And again, if there's any silver, I'll try to save that for the future to be able to use. Okay? All right, I think that's it on that. Let's go back over the bench, okay? Snake through here. We're still recording, yes. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, now the next step then would be for us to thread. I just want to show you how to do this. So you have your saw frame loose. You open this up. You slide this in, let it dangle. Again, it doesn't matter which end you do in terms of loosening. Some people like to have this one way or the other. It doesn't matter which block you're tightening. And then I slide this down. Now I'm going to saw to the inside of my line. Now it gets a little difficult because we've got a mask on. Normally I blow air on this to be able to see my line. So I'm flying kind of blind here. I usually sit here and go over and over. But I've got to be able to see that line. If you can't see that line, this is why this is going to be an activity for home. You know, for you to be able to do this at home with your bench pin set up, okay? Sam, don't forget to give your silver, okay, before you leave. Now, some people are in the mindset that they want to saw very, very accurately and right really close to that line. That's fine. That's totally fine. It's probably a good method to go with. Other people are like, hey, I don't mind filing. I kind of like to file. So I just want to get it cut out. And then they'll file later, right? Up to that line. So they'll cut kind of wide. I'm showing you kind of two methods in one here because I'm a little far away from my line in one area, and then another area I'm cutting a little closer. Okay, now I just cut that piece out. It's going to fall out. Again, save that, okay? Now, take your tension off. Okay, now notice my line. See how I'm close over here, but I'm not over here, right? So I can come back with a saw frame and actually use it kind of like a file. And this is something I want you to get used to. You can come back with the saw blade and just use it as a device to cut a little closer, but still not cut on the line. Catch tray out here so I can catch this. So I'm just going to saw right along that line, almost like like this is a file, and I can do some cleanup work. Now, if you were going to do a detail where it was a single line that you were sawing, you just need to saw really accurately, like along that line. And what I'm saying is, like, if that's just a singular kind of like detail line that you pierce through, and you want to drill a very small hole so we don't see that starting point, right? So you be more particular in that case. In this case, I've got this large void that I can get into with a file. Okay, so we got rid of that. Now I'll pop that back off. Now, we would do all those saw-on details normally in the inside and get all those done. And normally, I'd then swap out with my needle file to my needle file sets before I cut out the outside, because then I've got plenty to hang on to. And I can use a vise to hold this if I want to securely. Now, we're going to talk more about finishing, but one of the keys to finishing is making sure that your piece is stable. I've seen students do this, or they're holding this in their hands. I call that air filing, okay? You've got no support, and I hate listening to students complain about filing and sanding. And the reason I hate it is because most of the time the complainers, the whiners, are people who are either doing this, or they're like watching a movie while they're filing, or they're doing something else. They're not in the moment focused on it. So we need to make sure that we've got this firmly supported, okay? And then you'll notice I'm going to use my file, and I'm doing a downstroke in this case. Now, I've got a question on our quiz that says, what stroke does the file cut on? It cuts on the forward stroke away from the body, okay? So it cuts on the forward stroke. You may see people file like this, back and forth like a saw. That is not what this is meant to do. On these needle files, it will clog. There are some files that you can use in a back and forth stroke, but these files will clog very, very easily. So I make sure this is supported well against my bench pen. Sometimes I even hold it here against the edge, or I hold it here against my bench, and I use the file to basically remove material down to that line, okay? And you'll notice I'm doing this rocking motion because I'm following the line. I'm not just sitting in one spot going and then moving over and then going I'm like actually using the full stroke of that file and following. You'll wind up with a much smoother finish if you do that. And I'm watching my line the whole time I do this to make sure I don't file past my line. This is where the accuracy comes in, okay? And again, you could use your saw blade to do a very similar thing by removing more material if we're close. I do have smaller needle files. Man, I got that file. And you'll also want to select the right profile. Each one of these files has a different profile to get into certain areas. So you want to select the right file for the right type of situation. If you're in a corner like this, don't use a half round file. You know, that's going to like round it out. So you need to find something with either a knife edge or a square edge along the side. My favorite files are really the half round that I just had out. I like the flat as well. That's one of my favorites. So, and the round is also very convenient, but again, don't use this. If you're trying to get some flat area, this is the wrong file to use, right? You're gonna use a flat file. If you need to file a long flat, you're gonna use that, like that, okay? So, again, choose the right file for what you're doing, okay? Again, we will talk more about finishing, but the goal would be for you to go ahead and start getting all your interior regions cut out, get them filed, and then come back and saw the outside exterior, and then we'll file it, okay? Now I'm going to be very particular about this particular piece. I'm real fussy about craftsmanship, okay? I personally believe that if you can't get down craftsmanship in the first semester, then like you're going to have more difficulties if you moving forward. So I'm going to be a stickler on accuracy and craftsmanship. No scratches, no marks. Like this thing is going to be perfect when you turn it in, okay? It's not even, it's like our samples that we've done so far have been like, yeah, okay, whatever, yeah. It's like you're learning the technique. This, I'm going to be very, very particular. So just know that, okay? I will grade this pretty harshly, okay? So that's why I want to make sure and help you get your plan down in terms of what you're going to be cutting out. So we'll talk about that next class. The reason I went ahead and moved forward with this demo was because I wanted you to know how to saw, and then we'll come in next class, next week, you'll have time to etch,
But if you don't get to etching, you can start on this, okay? And that way we can all be working on things. So I probably won't demo, like, I think we had planned to have a demo over riveting. I won't do that in class. I'll wait and do that later because I want to get the etchings done, and while you're waiting to etch, you can be working on this at the same time. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this. I think we've got about a week or so you can do some work at home too. But right now I know, because I haven't looked at your designs, it maybe is difficult for you to start on this week. So what I would prefer you to do is take a little piece of your copper or brass and just practice your sawing. And I'll post a video on getting your pattern ready and how to do that, okay? All right, let's see if we missed anything. How are we doing on time? What time is it? 9 what?
9:02.
9:02. Okay, so we're pretty good. So, so I did print vinyl. So your vinyl's over here. If you uploaded an image, it should be cut over there. Okay. I also have the selfies. I printed more of those if people need those. So those are over there. So you can make sure and pick those up. So again, assignment-wise, here are assignments. Okay, you ready for this? So if you haven't sent me vinyl, send me vinyl. Okay, or drawings for vinyl. We got to get those done. If you haven't done your paint pen, how many people have done their paint pen on their aluminum? Good. Okay, great. So that's done. So if you wanted to, before you leave it, we got about 15 minutes or so, you could try to go ahead and etch those if you want to. Up to you. Not mandatory, because we're going to have some time next class. If you want me to look at drawings today, I can look at those. That way you can get an okay on which one you're going with. But we need to practice sawing this weekend. Okay, so set up a setup at home so you can get your bench pen going, and then get your file ready for the ring, finalized, the final drawing, so that we can transfer it. So that would mean you need to make copies of it, or you need to do it digitally, or whatever, however you decide to do it. Okay. So basically, I want to be able to come in next class and have etchings to do and sawing to start on. Okay, that's our goal. All right.
Question about the ring drawings.
Yeah.
So everyone seems to be give a different size. You know, like
Yes.
a 9 finger on and do it on. And the drawing, if I guess I do it digitally, which I'm planning to do.
Yeah.
Would you just make it from the reference chart?
I will show you that in the video. So what I do is I'll take the drawing and I'll lay it down and I'll put a ruler in the drawing, or in the picture. Okay, so I'll take my drawing, ruler, and I take my phone and I photograph that. And then I also have that measurement of what, like, you would know what that measurement is. You could also write that and tell me, like, from here to here in the drawing is supposed to be how many ever millimeters. And then I'll show you in the video. We'll reference that using the program that I use. I use Rhino, but I'll use Rhino and I'll show you in the video how to do that. Okay?
Yeah.
How to scale it so it matches. That way when it prints out, it's accurate. Yeah, it's a good question.
You're gonna show us like how to do this.
I'm going to show you how to do that. Yeah, if you choose to do it digitally. Okay? You don't have to though. Some of you may say, hey, I just want to be able to do this just with a nice drawn line, and I just want to do a one-to-one photocopy. Paste that on, I'm good to go. So you can do it that way too. But I'd like to show you this because a lot of students are like, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not digital. I'm not a computer person. I can't stand it. And then I show them how easy it is to do this, and then they're like, oh. And then from that point on, the rest of the semester they're like, okay, like I see how that doing something accurate kind of relies on this real fine line quality, you know. And again, it's not impossible. I think what it is, it's funny, I've seen students' designs get better when they start having to do it digitally, because it makes them make a decision earlier in the process. Does that make sense? So like normally what I see is that students like, well, I'll worry about that later. And they just start. And then I'm like, they jack up so many pieces of metal and they just screw up over and over, and it's because they don't have a clear plan. This becomes a roadmap. You know, this is a roadmap for where we're headed on vacation, right? And there's nothing to say that, like, if we notice something while we're sawing, that we can't say, oh, look, there's an exit for the world's largest ball of twine. We can get off the exit for a little bit and like check that out. But we know that we're supposed to end up here. And so that's what this does. It gives you a roadmap to kind of follow. So anyway, yeah. So any other questions about sawing? Okay, so again, we are going to spend more time talking about finishing this and what I expect for this. Right now, it's just a matter of getting our drawing prepared and then just start sawing. So I think I've covered everything on anything I missed. Let's see, center punch. Just make sure you know the vocab stuff. You're going to break a lot of blades. Let me know. I will give you more if you break. But do me a favor. If you're breaking blades, if you break 5 blades like within a minute, you are doing something wrong. Okay? So what's that definition of insanity? You ever heard that? The definition of insanity? What is it? Never heard that? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? That's the definition of insanity, right? And so if you're breaking blades over and over, don't continue to do the same thing you're doing and expect there to be a different result. If you're sitting here and you're not paying attention, or your body posture, the big part is that honestly like positioning, and I think of myself kind of like a little the scroll saw. I think of myself like a human scroll saw, and so my job is to kind of keep this moving vertically, not like this. But you're so worried about following your line, you start not realizing you're going sideways or whatever. So keep that straight. You will develop your own style eventually, where you actually start to steer with this and this. That's when you know you're cruising, and you'll be able to go super fast and cut amazing. So eventually, it takes time. So all right, I think that's it. So again, the rest of the class, if you do want to fix up some etching solution for your aluminum, we can do that. If you're like, okay, I need to want Frankie to look at my rings, that's fine. We'll do that. So okay, can we look at yours?
Yeah.
Great.
Kind of did some more last time we talked.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Why not?
Like, I like this one.
Yeah. And in this case, it's the black that gets.
Then, like, what would be cut out in white, and then, like, that would be the silver part. Does that make sense?
The black part would be the silver part.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I'm just looking to make
Yeah.
sure that nothing gets cut out. That would be okay. That would be. Yeah, you get a little close there, like this little up in there. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
possible. That's possible. Yeah.
This is not fine.
That's
Like,
fine.
I would love her fine, whichever.
That's fine. Yeah.
But I also like these,
Yeah, I do too.
like the bark type shapes, and like, I don't know, they're just more organic and funky.
Yeah, the thing I think I would work on with it is like this gets a little weird where this is kind of connected at the edge, but yeah, then it's open over here.
Like,
So
yeah.
I'd go one or the other.
Okay.
Like continue that line.
Yeah, that's why I've like done this where I did all of them open.
Yes.
Just to play with them.
Yeah, and that's interesting too.
I don't know, but I also just kind of like the like not tree type shape.
Yeah, let me get a pencil.
I have a pen.
Let me if you don't mind, can I draw over the top of this? I mean, like, I think the thing with this one, if you go with this one, I would kind of play with your variation of that width of that line. And give it a little bit more movement. You know, something like that, and then like same thing here. If I did that here, I'm thinking about what is left. So I'm also want that line to have. Like I just made it a little more dramatic, you know. Too high there.
little subtle undulations that change that line quality. So they would see. Yeah. So there's like these little, because we can get so detailed with it. And it's funny, sometimes I'll draw these things big, because then when I shrink it, you start to pick up on the little subtleties. They look that you have these little details. So that's all I would say in any of these that you do. You're getting more of that here. Like I love what's happening like there. You know, like that kind of like, and
That's why I kind of like this picture a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think it'll look a lot different than like when it's in
It
this
will, in the
software than
round.
It does.
yeah, and in the round too. In the
Yeah.
round, it'll transform it. I would say if you do this one, go ahead and do what you've done here. The only reason I say that is because these will stick out
Yeah.
really far and they'll get caught on things. So functionality wise, I think
Yeah,
you'll be more
that's-
likely to wear this.